parents in 2014 came to Borough Hall and alerted the BP to the fact that we've got a problem on Staten Island. We've got students that our children have dyslexia. They're going to the public schools and their needs are not being met. So we set off on a mission to find out, one, what's the real need, and two, then we went around visiting schools on and off the island. We went to Teaneck, New Jersey. We went up to the Windward School in White Plains, New York. We went to Brooklyn to learn about these schools and what they're doing. So one, we found there's absolutely a need. We sent out a survey just online to say, how many people know of a child or have a child with special needs, specifically language-based or dyslexic in nature. We got within a week over 350 respondents and over 145 children identified, just like that. So we know there's a need here. So then we found out, okay, well, what are their options? Do they have options here, and what does that look like? We approached the Department of Education and said, hey, we've got this need, what are you doing? And they basically say, would you even start a school to help these children? And the answer was no. So we moved on and said, okay, well, let's figure out what this looks like. So in visiting these schools, and by the way, all of these schools are private schools. So the lowest tuition is $50,000. So if you all know and have special needs children, you know what needs to be done. First, you need a diagnosis, right? And neuropsychs are private diagnoses, which cost on average to $3,000 to $5,000. So you get diagnosed. Then you have to sue the Department of Education to get into one of those schools. You have to pay for an attorney, an advocate, and then from there you need to do this every year, year after year after year. And then these children on top of this need to commute to Teaneck, New Jersey, or to Queens, or to different locations. We have a boy who commutes over 2 hours each way to go to school in Queens, just so he can get an education. So we decided, let's look at opening a charter school out here. We looked at private and we looked at public, and charter schools are public schools. We didn't want to have parents go through that rigmarole of having to, if we had a private school, get the neuropsych, get the DOE funding, all of this, because we know the reality is there are parents that don't have these resources. So we looked into charter schools. So we also aligned ourselves with an organization called Child Mind Institute. So these children that don't necessarily have diagnoses yet, they're going to help us to diagnose and evaluate these kids, free of charge to parents. So the goal was really to create a community school that could address these needs. And the reality is, it's just teaching to them differently. It's teaching to them in a multi-sensory way that all children understand. So it's really incorporating sound to letters, making that connection for them, because their brains don't naturally make those connections. Once you do that, these are bright, typical kids. They probably have some comorbid things going on, like executive functioning or ADHD, but these are kids that can learn. I'll throw out a couple of dyslexics you may have heard of. Anderson Cooper, Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. These are people that have creative minds that think differently. So when we were naming the school, we took into consideration all these things. So we're naming it Bridge Prep for Creative Thinkers, because we want to address their strengths.
What is it?
Bridge Prep for Creative Thinkers.
Bridge Prep.
So the bridge, as we know on Staten Island, we've got a lot of bridges, right? But bridges go both ways. They can take you places.
Yep.
So that was really the goal. It was very thoughtful. All of the people on the planning team, we're all Staten Islanders. This is a charter school. I know people have different opinions of charter schools. At the end of the day, this is a community-based school. And we intend on working with the Department of Education. We get along really well with them. We plan on creating a teacher training institute to help teachers that aren't even teaching at this school out here to help other children. And the way that works for these children is a method called Orton-Gillingham. Is the most recognized method, but it can be any type of multisensory instruction. We're going to couple that learning with a writing program called Hockman Writing Program. Again, these are ways that we're going to address the whole child in terms of their reading, their ability to read, and then their ability to express themselves. There'll be many other facets of the school. There'll be after-school programs. We know that they're creative. There'll be a lot of movement in this school, because we've also learned that children with dyslexia, even standing, helps them learn better. So how can we address the whole trial? We're doing all of these research-based things and trying to incorporate it. We took a blank page and said, okay, we can create this school. What is it going to look like? These are some of the folks on our planning team you'll see here. Also, that's Assemblywoman Joanne Simon. I don't know if you all know, there's actually legislation pending up in Albany which would do two things. One, it would mandate that the Department of Education acknowledge dyslexia on the IEP. Right now it's not acknowledged. It would also mandate them to then teach a way in which the child learns, and it would mandate teacher training as well, right? Because you can't teach it if you don't know how to teach it. So the school is going to be a small school because we've also found in the research that these children need to be in smaller class sizes. We need to address and remediate with their learning disabilities. So the class sizes would be 12 children per class. When it's fully operational, it would go from grades 1 through 8. We would start with grades 2 and 3, work our way up to 5, and then wrap around to 1. And the reason being, quite honestly, you don't necessarily diagnose dyslexia before the child is really engaged in reading. But now that we've got mandatory pre-K for all, right, years down the road you're going to start to find it a little bit earlier. So we're going to help parents if the child hasn't been diagnosed. We're going to work with ChildMind, right? So that's really the goal, is to have these small classroom settings. There would be 3 classes per grade. We have applied to the state to be approved, so we're going through the New York State Education Department. If they so decide to approve us, we would find out in November of this year, and then the school would open in September of 2018. It would be located somewhere here on Staten Island. We've requested space with the DOE. If they don't have space, which very well might be a reality, then we have to find private space. So there's a whole procedure to all of this. And as you probably know, when you have more children applying to a charter school than you have seats, there's a lottery that kicks in. So we're now working out the details of the lottery because we really want to have some seats specifically. Believe it or not, the state has charter schools for autistic kids, and the entry in can be a diagnosis of autism, but they won't do that for dyslexia. So we've got to find a way to, it's crazy, right? We want to serve a special needs population, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through in order to get there. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do the lottery right now, where we can really address and get the majority of kids that we want to get. But it will also include siblings, for example. So let's say, you know, Johnny's going here and his brother's coming up. For a parent to have to drag their kids all over the island, it doesn't make sense. So siblings get in as well. So there'll be integration in the school. There'll be all different types of kids. But basically, even if the school is on the South Shore, Mid-Island, North Shore, it's still better than traveling to Queens or to Teaneck, New Jersey. And you'll be in a community. Right? So I will tell you, this started with the borough president and moved on. We have every politician on Staten Island that's on board. So there's not any political issues. Everybody we met with, and they said, why wouldn't we do this? Right? We're trying to help these kids. So let's see if I've forgotten to tell you anything else. And then I'm going to ask you guys if you have any questions as well. I think I've got most of it. Our planning team is from the island, which is amazing. We've got parents, teachers, neuropsychologists. On our board of directors, we have our former Assemblyman Lou Tobacco, who's a fabulous connection and a wonderful human being, Vicki Cerullo. Our chairman right now is Rose Kerr, who was the principal at Siskel, who opened her own school, which has an Elizabeth Connolly Center, I believe. So it's really a group of individuals that got together, and one of the people on our board, and we're thrilled to have her, she transferred here with the Coast Guard in August. She was the parent liaison at the only public district school for dyslexia in the United States. So we've hopefully got this covered, but we know we're going to need more community help. We're not going to be able to help all the children. There's a lot of older children, and it's actually very sad, who struggle every day in school. So what we want to also do is the teacher training we're going to provide. These teachers, in order to get certified, need 100 hours of practicum. What we'd like to do in our model is create an after-school program where these teachers, while they're training, they could help free of charge kids in the community, because right now, when they go to tutoring services, it's about $100 an hour to get tutored. So it's got a lot of arms and legs to this, but we've found in research conservatively, you could say 1 in 10 have dyslexia. More likely it's 1 in 5. It is the most common learning disability out there. And all we need to do is teach differently. So we want to be part of the community. We love teachers. We want to be out there, and we just wanted to share, and thank you for letting us share today. Does anybody have any questions of what I've forgotten?
No, just a question. You mentioned that the class size is 12.
Correct.
And what's the teacher ratio? Is there a parent in the room, or is it just a teacher?
That's a good question. So we'd like to have a teaching assistant and a teacher in every classroom, and then in addition, if a child's IEP mandates a para or something along those lines, they would have that as well. Right, and we're going to break out, you know, the goal, we're writing the curriculum, so the curriculum is going to be based on the Common Core, right? It's how you adapt it and how you model it and what the methodology is, to break out into smaller groups. So we've been working with Ann Edwards, who's a fellow at the Orton Gillingham Institute, to really figure out what the best models are. And she's trained many, many teachers and worked in amazing schools, and is really helping us to structure what that looks like. Because kids likely, as they get older, I mean, you're going to articulate up, we'd like to actually change the lottery down the road in 2 years once we get the state approval to add a grade like in 4th and 5th. So if there are kids out there that are diagnosed later, they still have an entry point in. The state, we're just finding it's interesting, they've got, you know, they want us to be innovative within a box.
Other than this dyslexic diagnosis, is there going to be any kind of screening? Because a lot of young individuals who have dyslexia also have some, you know, behavioral issues because they're so frustrated. Is there going to be a screening process other than the diagnosis?
No, so we have to fully figure out the lottery. So that's really the goal. It's a public school. You really can't screen. You can ask for information. So what we're trying to do is identify, right? And then we also want to, with Child Mind Institute, help to figure out, well, what is the real issue? It may or may not be dyslexia, right? And help parents identify, well, what is it that your child needs? And then be able to address that. So yeah, I mean, we fully anticipate there's going to be kids with behavioral issues. We fully anticipate they're going to lack executive functioning. We fully anticipate there's going to be comorbid issues. So then really, how do you work to address all of that? And part of the issue, what you're talking about, is their needs not being met. We're hoping, I mean, even with movement throughout the day, you know, having them standing up and creating an environment that's conducive for them to learn, that we eliminate some of that. You know, we don't want to sit there and force kids to read all day. They tend to be verbal, they tend to be very intelligent, they tend to be highly creative. So how do we create hands-on learning for them?
And you would be incorporating other related services such as speech and OT?
Absolutely.
That will also be incorporated into the program?
Yeah, we've even kicked around, we haven't come to a conclusion on it yet, is even, when we've priced it out, having a vision therapy lab at the school, because a lot of the kids also have vision and tracking issues. And you could do that relatively inexpensively as things go, and then you could staff it with SUNY graduates who could help the kids and make that part of the day for all children as well. Right, because a lot of kids don't necessarily, we found a lot of the kids with dyslexia do have tracking issues, so they don't necessarily have sight problems, they have vision problems with their eyes working together. And the way that we find this out, it was funny, we had a panel, the doctor talked about it, she goes, you'll notice these kids, they tilt their heads a lot because they're using their nose to block one eye, and 3D glasses will not work for them when they go to see a 3D movie because their eyes aren't working together. Simple, basic things, right? So we'd like to have, like, some of these trainings, invite teachers in, so they're, you know, we're not going to be able to help all kids. If there's going to be 36 kids a grade, there's going to be a lot of kids we can't catch.
I was just wondering about the ratio of, you said you were going to allow siblings to come to the school. So in my own opinion, for myself and my family, I wouldn't send my typical child to where my other son went to school because he'd be out of a neighborhood school and he would be with his peers in their neighborhood. So if people choose not to send their siblings, are you going to keep a ratio open, or would you open more seats to children?
Then we'd have more seats, right? We'd have more seats.
Okay, so you're not going to keep a ratio and say we must have
no.
percentage?
No.
Great, thank you.
No.
Two questions. My first question is this going to be open to kids off Staten Island?
It could be, but there's preference for District 31. And if all the seats are filled, then it's
Okay, so it's first District 31.
correct. That will be built into the lottery.
Now, this is going to be K through 8. What happens?
1 through 8.
1 through 8. Now, what happens in high school? Is there any plans for a high school or?
There is, and there's also plans. So one of the people that is helping us with the planning is a high school principal who's fabulous, who has implemented many, many innovative programs on the island. She's talked about training her, I said she, has talked about training her teachers to be able to catch the kids as well. So I also would love to speak to the DOE about maybe even having one middle school, just something. Because we identified 45 children who are currently in the 4th grade. So when, not next year, but they're going to middle school. Why can't we do something to help them? We have time to build this up. Like, look where they are, identify. But it's not on your IEP. Dyslexia, it might, be speech and language impairment. It'll be called different things. But we couldn't even identify these kids. So the parents know who they are.
I applaud this effort. I think it's great, but again, like you said, there's 1 in 8, 1 in 5. You said that.
1 in 5 is, yeah.
So we're not going to get everybody, which
No.
leaves out many kids. But my thing is, and I don't know much about dyslexia, but has anything been explored over these years? You said this has been going on for, 20 plus years.
Yes.
I'm sure it's probably longer than that. But with any type of disability or learning disability, why isn't there any accommodations provided, for these kids, whatever it may be? Maybe, why? Has that been explored, research?
It has. So it's multisensory in nature, right? That's how you remediate with this. It's multisensory.
Okay.
So you have to have the kids connect the sound to the letter to the word to the meaning. So this is what they're doing every day to decode a word to be able to read a sentence.
Well, let me just say this, but maybe someone will never get that. We're so stuck in the box that this is the standard, this is the way it has to be.
Right.
If you don't pass that standard, you don't graduate, which locks kids out of potential
Many things, yeah.
possibilities. This doesn't solve the problem. This is great, but it doesn't solve the problem. I don't know who's going to solve this problem, and maybe this isn't the form to talk about it.
Yeah.
We need to do so much better.
100% agree.
And the accommodation may be somebody's going to learn just by looking at and watching videos, because there's so many different ways to communicate.
Right.
And
I'm 100% with you. But here's the thing. If you taught every child in a multisensory way, you would catch all of them. You know why you didn't see it as much years ago when we were younger? We had phonics.
Right.
What was phonics? Sounds. Right? We had to learn those sounds. When we went to Orton Gillingham training, things I didn't know. The magic E. You put E on the end of the word, it makes the vowel before it say its own name. You could take the word dim, put an E on it, it becomes dime. These are the things we don't teach kids that these kids really need to know. A lot of kids you do not naturally assimilate how to read. We naturally assimilate communications. Reading is not a natural ability. We came up with it. It is not natural at all. So if we don't teach these kids, like when you took a foreign language in school, weren't you taught, like if you took Spanish, 2 L's make a Y sound? There's language-based information we don't teach our kids in schools. Right, it's just not, the teachers aren't trained that way.
So why aren't we, besides this, which I agree, I applaud you with this effort because it will draw attention to it.
Right.
But on a secondary level, like Chris is saying, why aren't we going back to the DOE saying, we need to change policy?
You do, and you need to also go to the colleges where they're teaching. Right, so you need to go to the regions that set the standards so there's a whole, and we've been working all the angles too, because we're going to start here with, let's try and help some kids right now. And then how do we kind of continue to impact in a much larger way?
At least every school have one classroom.
Right, but taking on the project, like you said, to teach other teachers, I think, is a...
And the teachers know. When you have dyslexia training, guess who comes out? The teachers. Because they know, they see their kids that are struggling.
Sure.
You know?
They want means to help them.
I mean, from a recruitment perspective, one of the things we talked about is working with like Shelley Green at the DOE and different, and the teachers, working with the superintendent to, all right, I'm going to address the kindergarten and first grade teachers. Here's what you would be looking for. Do you have a child who otherwise had an unexpected struggle in reading, right? It's easy to find them. You'll find them later on because you could just look at their ELA state tests, right? But this is now they're starting to fail, right? So now you're catching, we're trying to catch them before they have to suffer through that. But you're right, it's too big to address with just this.
Yeah.
But the question was either do something or do nothing.
Right.
And this was what we thought would be the best way that we could start to do this and continue the dialogue and push the conversation.
As well as
help.
We'll see a pilot.
Yeah.
Right, so in the first year, hopefully we're able to help 72 kids. Right, then you keep adding from there. So that's 72 more, and then if we can start with the after-school tutoring, all right, there's a couple more we're catching. Then if we can start to get more teachers involved, there's a couple more. So it's a start. We to your point, Laura Cavalieri's been talking about this. Laura was at that first meeting, Joanne Simon was there, Wendy Ramos, Rachel Catalano. It's been around for forever, and there's been nothing. In McKee High School. Yeah, she's got 2 in high school now. Yeah, so, and her mother's dyslexic. So it goes way before Laura as well. So this is nothing new. Nothing at all new. I think it's finally, and Laura's been pounding that drum for years, finally the mayor, the chancellor say the words dyslexia. Finally you've got Joanne Simon up in Albany who's going to help to push the envelope. So there's still a lot of awareness. When you talk to people, they really don't know what dyslexia is. Right?
Who's the governing body? Who's going to be overseeing this whole?
New York State Education Department. It's not Board of Ed. It's the State Education Department that approves the charter.
All right, good. So then the chancellor has nothing to do with it?
Not an iota.
Because, you know, I think the last meeting that we were in, I heard people say that we're in the charter school, oh, we don't handle that. It's the state.
That is correct.
Now here we go. Now you have to go into another process to get who's the state.
Who's accountable?
You know, so it's frustrating because not only do you have to teach the trainer, the teachers, you have to teach them how to read the IEP. A lot of them say, oh, I didn't see that.
Right.
Well, I don't know what that means. So that's kind of,
So when you've got, now picture a board of directors that isn't all business people and everything. These are teachers, these are parents, these are instructors, these are people who, if I can tell you, I was laughing, I go, yeah, we're having a planning meeting Friday night. I'm like, oh, it's Friday. At somebody's house tonight. We're all meeting to get you know, to complete the application to work on this. My daughter went to a charter school for 2 years. I know exactly what that parent was talking about.
Yes.
Exactly. There was no recourse. None. Zero. Because what happens then, by state law, the recourse is it then goes to the board of directors. A grievance committee is formed. And it doesn't really.
and you don't get your related services, so the kid, you know, by the time they get the related services, school is over.
Right.
So then like, you're back, like someone said, we're back to square one.
I'm with you 100%. And if we're out there, so the founder of the school who's going to be running it is Tim Costanza. Do you guys know Tim? He's with the DOE. He's a special education teacher who worked in the planning department. Tim also, the more we get into this, he goes, I can't believe this really goes on. So you've got people that are from Staten Island who are trying to help kids. That's really our goal. So if you tell me a child's not getting services or something's happening, that's not okay. That's not okay. Right. I would love to see charters be more aligned. They're just not. Like, we can't even go to like CEC 31. We're a totally separate entity. But
You gotta find somebody in the state, you have someone already set up to troubleshoot if they have a problem.
so we have a region out here, right? We've got Christine Sia. We've met with Christine Sia on many, many occasions. Right? We've, again, got our state politicians on board writing letters. They've written letters of endorsement for the school to the state. So my opinion is you should be able to go to Mike Cusick, to Christine Sia, to any of our state folks, right, and say, listen, we're having a problem here. And I would be the first one to cheerlead somebody to do that. Because why couldn't you have a committee to do that? I mean, you're all over the state. They approve all charters, and there's only a few left, believe it or not, to be created downstate. There's a cap on the amount of charter schools you can open. So that was the other reason, one, we wanted to do this, and two, before that number's lifted, we've been told we're one of the most innovative models they've seen. I don't know if they know what to do with us yet, but...
This model, I mean, I put my PTA PTA have,
Yeah.
is not to have parent involvement.
Yes.
So we've designated in our governance, the PTA president will be on the board. So I'm with you 150%. The more parental involvement, the more family engagement, and we heard this the other night, right? While we're doing special ed reform, the piece that we haven't hit on yet is the family engagement and parental engagement. It's huge. Because if we didn't have parents on this planning team, you'd be missing half the equation. It's like a three-legged stool. They're one of the key legs. You know, we need the instructional model, we need everything, but you need the teachers, you need the administration on it, you need the parents.
And the first grade was going to open up as first grade?
No, second and third. We wanted to open up 1 through 3, but again, the state said, no, you can only open up with 2 grades.
Second and third.
So we chose second and third.
I'm thinking about testing, Common Core testing.
Right.
That happens next year, going into that.
Right, so it gives you time, right, to get the accommodations on the IEP, right? So think about it, right? Think of all the things logistically that need to happen. So we want to align, right? Because actually the CSE will be writing the IEPs. We'll have a team there, but things go through the CSE still. So that's how the DOE is involved from a space perspective and from a CSE perspective.
And what about 5 to 4 accommodations?
Absolutely.
And who's training the CSE people? Sorry, just saying.
Right, and there's certain, I will tell you, I have a lot of cell phone numbers at DOE. I mean, I work very well with Kim Ramonis, I work very well with Shelley Greed. They do have a liaison that they put for charter schools. So I would want to work really closely with them. And I think even for the first year, even attend all the meetings. Because I think you're 100% right, that I don't find that people, they do oppose things, but I don't find that they always know, they haven't been trained properly, right? And when you bring up things, like I've gone to IEP meetings where they're having a whole discussion about this child struggling and nobody's brought up assistive technology.
Yeah.
And then when they brought up assistive technology, nobody knew where to send the request to.
Yeah. Oh, I had someone that they filled out the request, but the psychologist never pressed the send button.
Right. And then you wait.
Sit down and that's like 2 months after.
So as the CEC special ed person, I could tell you, like I would call Rachel Sears, I'm like, did you get this one yet? Did you get this one? Did you get this one? And there would be an appointment set up within 3 weeks. So you're right, you can make it happen, you just need to know who to call.
Is it second and third as opposed to first and second grade, just to give them the opportunity in first grade to see if they could manage it or you could diagnose it correctly? Or
I think, one, they may not be diagnosed yet. So the more you have pre-K and you're reading earlier, you're going to start to notice it younger. The other thing is just logistically, let's say the school is on the South Shore and my child's Mid-Island and North Shore and they're in the first grade. I'm going to be hesitant to send them off, right? Second grade, I'm realizing they're struggling. And it's still going to be a challenge. Do not get me wrong. So this is from the parent perspective, right? I mean, people say this, oh, no, we'll fill up the seats. And I'm like, no, you're going to be hesitant to send your kid because all their friends go there. They're going to cry when you tell them they can't go to school with their friends, right? So that's really why second, and then we're going to wrap around to first when it's more established, when people say, okay, this school knows what they're doing. They're doing a good job. My child needs help. I'm going to send them there.
Just to piggyback a little bit to what you just said, isn't it sometimes difficult to diagnose children that are under the age of 8 and 7?
It can be difficult, but they will exhibit certain things. So a lot of kids with dyslexia, they kind of fake it, right? But the neuropsychologists, we work with Dr. Bridie, Amy Margolis, who's at Columbia, they know exactly what tests to give them.
So the Child Mind Institute, are they testing here at their location on Staten Island?
They will. They said, we asked them, would you be able to diagnose like how many kids? They're like, we could do up to 60 a month. I'm like, wow. So we're kind of formalizing all of that with them, how it would work. But again, right, from a parent perspective, wear that hat. All right, I've got other kids, I've got after-school activities, I've got this. Maybe we could set up, and to me, you've got all the politicians involved, we have mammographies and everything else, like why couldn't we create or set aside some funding for diagnostics? There's a lot. I think you just need to be open to thinking about it. So yeah, they're willing, we can bring them there. Amy, actually, Margolis, and it was a little controversial, she goes, imagine if we did MRIs, if we did brain scans of all their brains when they entered the school, because you can physically see that their brains light up differently. And then you could see if you're remapping. You could actually physically see that you're remapping their brains.
If I remember correctly, Childline Institute are using MRIs,
They are.
you know, to diagnose children with mental illness, but not for every child that comes in for testing.
Right. So we actually sat down, we've created a list of what some of the testing would be. So it's a lot of details, but it's also knowing how the community works, right? So when we have people, I mean, let's face it, Staten Island is unique from any of the other boroughs.
Yes.
You know, people don't understand, when I was at Lavelle Prep, my daughter was there, we went to Tweed to fight for busing. They had this lovely transportation map mapped out, and I'm looking there and I'm like, those are express buses. I was like, we have a train. Like, we don't have... Right. This isn't Brooklyn or Manhattan, you know. No real roads go through the whole island. You're cut off by parks, everything else. There's no sidewalks. So when you know that, you take that into consideration, right? So we would like to have this located as centrally as possible, quite honestly. You know, and the other thing we found was even presenting on the North Shore, there's a lot of kids on the North Shore that have dyslexia that have never been diagnosed. When I talk to people at Family Life, I mean, you know, one of the women who works there, she's like, I'm dyslexic, but I didn't know till I was in high school. They're diagnosed, they struggle their whole time. And Laura Cavalieri will be the first to tell you, if you don't address this, you could look at your prison pipeline and look at how many people are illiterate and have dyslexia in prison. They drop out, they check out, they're done, this is too hard.
Are you engaging other, you know, the agencies that actually represent here with their school? Are they engaged? Are they...
We're trying to engage. This is part of it, right? Getting the word out. So we've presented at all the community boards.
Okay.
We've done 3 different public meetings. So we're trying our darndest to get the word out there. New York One has covered us, so we were at the Staten Island Economic Development conference they just had the other week, so we're trying everything. So please do. There's lots up here. My business card too. There's an email, Staten Island Dyslexia School at gmail.com. I'm at Borough Hall, StatenIslandUSA.com. You can find my information.
The target date you said is how long? Did you say?
If we get approved, we'll find out in November of this year.
Okay.
It would open September of 2018.
Thank you.
What are the chances of you getting approved?
This first round that just happened, out of, let's say, 20, they approved 3. I think we're good. So there's a letter of intent, there's an application, then there's a capacity interview. They actually sit there, and only the board members can go in, and they kind of drill you about your school. And I think that's really because they've been burned before. They want to make sure you really know what you're doing and you have the capacity to do it. So I don't know. I think we're original. I think the charters were designed to address an unmet need in a community. I mean, we're kind of the definition of that. We just need to make sure that they're comfortable with the fact that we're not kind of segregating, which is interesting. You can have an all-autistic school, but you can't have... So we've got to kind of work within their rules and find precedents and try and get to as many kids as possible. We do have a sibling component. And listen, if not enough kids apply, any kid in D31 who applies. But the whole goal was to set up this school to help the kids that aren't being helped. Right? So you could have a parent that just says, you know what? I'd like to go to that school. It's going to be 12 kids in a class. My kid's smart. They'd really thrive there. I'm going to apply. And they're absolutely within their rights to apply. But we would like to really help the kids that aren't being helped. So, I think that's it. Thank you.